across the borders area, likely to see some heavy bursts for a time and showers feeding in from the northwest, staying drier towards the south, and there will be some clear skies, but quite a bit of cloud, and we have mild air across us, so temperatures not dropping a huge amount for most places. Through Saturday itself then, a bit of cloud bringing some drizzly rain across northern and western parts of England and Wales perhaps. Towards the southeast though, lots of fine and at times sunny weather again. The more unsettled picture will be once more across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here some hefty showery rain pushing its way through, and temperatures for many will be down a touch compared to today. As we go into Sunday, and we're going to see further showers which could be heavy at times across northern areas, drier towards the south, but temperatures dropping compared to recent.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. The M6 in Cumbria is partly blocked each way by an accident between junctions 40 and 39 between Penrith and Shap, causing delays, and the outside lanes closed each way at junction 39 at Shap after a separate accident there. Also looking slow now in Staffordshire. The A444 is blocked at Stappen Hill for emergency pothole repairs off the A511 Bridge Street, causing delays. In the West Midlands, New Street in Dudley is closed off Ednam Road for an investigation. In Powys, the A4067 remains closed in both directions at Astragunlice because of a landslip that's been closed since Monday night. And in Dorset, the A350 is blocked southbound by an accident on Sturt Road in Poole off the Holes Bay roundabout, causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The perception of a crime being committed is not based on whether that person intended to commit a crime or not, but whether the victim, in inverted commas, or anybody else for that matter who happened to hear whatever was said, determines that it was motivated by malice or ill will. Most of these things come out in heated exchanges or in, very casual exchanges. And then somebody says, oh, I'm offended or I'm hurt or I'm whatever because this was clearly malicious and it's against me as a black person or a transgender or sexuality, whatever it might be. And somebody says, I perceive this to be motivated by hate. Now, at that point, what is the reasonable test that anybody could apply as to what was in somebody's mind at the time? You don't know what I'm thinking now. I don't know what you're thinking now. Why is it that a crime can be committed on the basis of what somebody is alleged to be thinking?
Well, that's also how discrimination often works, because people have worked out these days that saying something or sending an email like one I received some years ago that said, let's go round her place with pickaxe handles and balaclavas and see what we can do. Now, that's an email that was sent about me. People have worked out that you don't do that. But from the circumstance of what happens, if racial taunts were being shouted, if taunts about someone's protected characteristic were being shouted in the run-up to what then happened, it would be pretty obvious that that was a hate crime.
But we know, for example, that street preachers have been arrested merely for quoting the Bible and without actually intending, anything beyond that.
Very good morning to you. It's 9:30 on Friday, April the 12th. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Ben Leo, and Pip Thompson.
Do we do enough for our veterans? The Prime Minister is launching an employment plan today to help get them into high-paid jobs after they leave the forces.
£2.1 million. That's how much Rishi Sunak is putting into Operation Prosper. Labour say it's a step in the right direction, but that this government has failed veterans.
Keeping Britain safe. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer pledges the UK's nuclear deterrent is the, quote, bedrock of his plans to keep the country safe.
Yes, Keir Starmer is determined to make the Labour Party the party of defence. But does he really have the cash to put his money where his mouth is? Find out more with me very soon.
We've got the latest reaction to the death of former sports star, Hollywood star O.J. Simpson. He was, of course, infamous, acquitted of 2 murders. He's dead at the age of 76.
And WhatsApp age change. Social media giant Meta is under fire for lowering the minimum age for WhatsApp from 16 to 13. Let us know what you think. Is it irresponsible?
Harry Kane's children are involved in a car crash. 3 of his youngsters were taken to hospital after being involved in the incident in Germany. They're said to be doing fine.
And also, a jam-packed show coming up. Barry Geraghty, former Grand National winner, he's going to be joining us live to give the lowdown on this Saturday's, tomorrow's big race. And also, Harry and Meghan Pip, they've got new Netflix shows coming out. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, they've got a big multi-million-pound deal. They've got to keep making something. It's going to be about polo, isn't it?
Harry's is on polo.
Meghan's is on cooking.
And gardening
Friendship.
and friendship, yeah.
Friendship, that's an interesting one.
Bit of a snooze fest compared to dishing the dirt on the royals, don't you think?
Will the Royals get a mention? What do you think about everything we're talking about? Maybe there's something we're not talking about that you want to talk about. Do let us know. gbnews.com/your say. First, let's bring you right up to date with the latest headlines.
Very good morning to you from the newsroom. It's just after 9:30. A look at the headlines this hour. Sir Keir Starmer is expected to say that Britain's nuclear deterrent is the bedrock of Labour's plan to keep the country safe. The Labour leader is visiting Barrow-in-Furness today, where nuclear submarines are being built. He's expected to reaffirm his party's commitment to defence spending with a pledge to boost investment and strengthen Britain's security and economic growth if Labour wins the next election. The government, though, has dismissed the plan as a distraction, but Sir Keir Starmer says it's an essential step in the face of rising global threats and growing Russian aggression. Britain is turning an economic corner, that's according to the Chancellor, after the nation's output grew by 0.1% in February. The Office for National Statistics also revised January's figure, pushing it up to 0.3%. Those latest figures suggest Britain is coming out of recession with significant improvements across manufacturing, particularly in the car sector. Lord Cameron has warned today that Iran shouldn't draw the Middle East into a wider conflict. The Foreign Secretary spoke to his Iranian counterpart following threats made by Tehran against Israel. There are concerns that an Israeli airstrike that killed 2 Iranian generals last week could provoke a retaliation. Meanwhile, the US has told its officials and their families in Israel not to travel outside 3 areas: Tel Aviv, Jerusalem and Beersheba. And social media giant Meta has been criticised for lowering the minimum age for WhatsApp from 16 to 13. Campaigners say the move is tone-deaf and highly irresponsible. However, Meta says it does bring the app's age limit in line with most countries and insists protections are in place. Well, it comes as the tech firm, which also owns Facebook and Instagram, unveiled a range of new safety features, including automatic protections against inappropriate images, which will be switched on by default for those under 18. Those are the headlines from the newsroom for now. More in the next half hour. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the code there on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson.
Good morning to you. I'm just getting used to this gbnews.com/your say situation. It's my first day back since implementing the system, so I can see all your comments, which is good. However, I cannot reply to them or message you, so if I'm silent, that's why. But yeah, keep the comments flowing in.
All those of you who are itching for a response from Ben Leo this morning.
I'm sure you're not. I'm sure you're not. Right, let's get on with our first story, shall we? Is enough being done to support our veterans? Today, Rishi Sunak is launching an employment plan which promises to help veterans secure highly paid jobs after they leave the armed forces.
£2.1 million is being put into Operation Prosper, but is that just a drop in the ocean to support those who put their lives on the line for our country?
GB News reporter Charlie Peters joins us live in the studio. Good morning, Charlie. Some would say £2.1 million is a drop in the ocean. It's not going to touch the sides. Is that enough for our veterans?
That is the perspective of Steve McCabe, Labour's shadow veterans minister, who said that it's a step in the right direction, but he said that more broadly, the government has been failing the veterans community after the last 14 years, saying that they've halved, in his view, support for veterans' employment. Now, what the government's trying to do here is bring in more of a connection between the armed forces community and actually a lot of areas of employment and many industries where they're not typically associated, such as energy, manufacturing, and indeed the professional services. Now, 89% of veterans are employment, which is an all-time high as it stands. And that actually compares with a nationwide average of 75%. So veterans, actually, in comparison to the wider public, are in a much better position. However, this does come at a time where the government is trying to engage with wider veterans' issues. Homelessness and mental health have been key pledges of their mission since this Parliament came into effect. And they are trying to capitalise, I think, on a much broader success that we have seen in wider UK industry. Professional services are now worth £185 billion. It's seen Britain become the fourth largest exporter in the world on the back of that rise. So trying to bring veterans in that space could help bring that 89% even higher.
You mentioned there homelessness. That is a growing problem. Last year, homelessness amongst veterans, we understand, in England, rose by 14%.
Yeah, and a major issue. And the Veterans Minister, Johnny Mercer, we visited a facility that he launched in December as part of that long-term plan to bring veterans' homelessness. This government actually pledged at the end of last year to end it. One of the main questions GB News was asking then repeatedly was, you've made this pledge, you're nowhere near achieving that target. And they say, the government's position is that they've got all the resources in place to end veterans' homelessness and the plan is there. It's just going to take time. Speaking to many of the charities that work in homelessness for veterans, and it's important to stress, actually, this is a wraparound service. There's no just you work in homelessness and nothing else. They're working very much in employment, issues around addiction. It is a holistic approach to dealing with the issue. They say very much that the approach needs to be broader. You need to take in all of these considerations. You can't just offer a home.
I speak to many homeless people down by the seaside where I live in West Sussex, and they say that they suffered from PTSD from various tours abroad, Afghanistan, Iraq, and they say they just weren't getting the help, the mental health help from either the army or the government or the NHS to treat that PTSD. How big an issue is PTSD and associated mental health problems with vets?
I think there's a national consciousness about this issue now, but in particular from many of the charity campaigns that were launched during the wars in Afghanistan and indeed in Iraq. But the army always stresses, as do many troops, that soldiers actually on average have a stronger mental health record than the wider public. It's when people leave that those issues arise, in particular with employment and homelessness, because the army might have provided your entire life, or the Navy, or the Marines, or the Air Force, your housing, your employment, of course, but also medical and dentistry. Your whole community, your whole life is within those barbed wires. And suddenly, if you leave that space, then you're at the mercy of the civilian world.
What does the army do to help prepare leavers for the real world, for Civvy Street?
Well, I think those transition processes are constantly being improved. But £2.1 million that's going on to improving the link between the military and industry. Well, Labour say that it's a step in the right direction. It's clearly part of a much broader and ongoing package.
Interesting as well that this is coming at the same time as the former Armed Forces Minister James Heapy's been speaking about requiring veterans again to serve again in a national crisis. He's talking about having a large strategic reserve.
And members of the armed forces who've left, often within the last up to 20 years, regularly get letters from the Ministry of Defence asking them if they're still available should the balloon go up and you're required to serve again. That strategic reserve has kind of always been in place, but it is certainly being renewed amid these ongoing threats. And of course, the size of the British Army now is below the capacity of Wembley Stadium. It has been for a long time, and it is shrinking. We're going to hear later about Labour's potential commitment to the armed forces to turn that around. But from the government's perspective today, it's all about veterans and improving that wraparound support.
OK. Thank you very much, Charlie. Well, we are talking about that because Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the UK's nuclear deterrent is the bedrock of his plan to keep Britain safe.
Yes, and that's in stark contrast, of course, to Jeremy Corbyn, who was the champion of nuclear disarmament.
Earlier, the Shadow Defence Minister Luke Pollard spoke to our breakfast team, Ellie and Stephen. This is what he had to say.
The world is a more contested and difficult place than it has been for a very long time. And that's why we need to make sure that the armed forces have the resources they need to keep the UK and our allies safe. That's why a commitment to the continual at-sea deterrent, those nuclear submarines always at sea, able to defend the UK and our allies, is so important. But it's also why we're setting out that defence spending should be directed at UK companies first before we look at buying from international companies.
We're now, excuse me, let me have a cough and then I'll carry on speaking. Right. We're now joined by our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. A very good morning to you, Olivia. So, Olivia, give us more detail then about what the Labour leader is expected to say. He does want to increase that defence budget to 2.5% of GDP.
Yeah, so this is his big pitch this morning. He wants to increase defence spending to 2.5%. At the moment, it is at 2.3%. Consecutive Conservative defence secretaries have asked the Chancellor to raise it to 3%. Most recently, Ben Wallace, who earned a lot of plaudits in the wider Conservative Party for pushing for that. But again and again, the Chancellor has said no. So this feels a little bit as though Keir Starmer is sort of trying to steal the Conservatives' clothes on this. There is a bit of a caveat, though. He has said that he will raise it to 2.5% if Labour's borrowing plans allow for it. So he's given himself a bit of wiggle room to dilute that policy a bit later down the line if it turns out that Labour doesn't really have the money for it. This impassioned commitment to nuclear defence is very interesting too. Keir Starmer has promised a triple lock for nuclear defence. He says that the Labour Party will build 4 new submarines in Barrow and Furness, that he will continue updating the submarines that we've got, renewing and rejuvenating them when required, and he is promising to invest in submariners. So everything there is a total turnaround from what Jeremy Corbyn was saying just 5 years ago. The former Labour, of course, wanted to scrap Trident altogether. Now, it'll be really interesting to see how this all plays out with the country at large and the Labour Party itself too. It's thought that being the sort of party of defence will play very, very well in some of those sort of Tory heartland areas. Already, Labour is leading in the polls when it comes to defence. 24% of the country trust the Conservatives on defence, 34% trust Labour more. So it is quite likely that Labour will sweep up some naturally Conservative votes because of this. But, of course, there are plenty of Labour Party members who are much more of the Jeremy Corbyn mindset and would like to see nuclear deterrence scrapped altogether. What will they make of this? Will they turn out pounding the roads, sending leaflets around, campaigning for the Labour Party when the Labour leader totally disagrees with them on a policy this important? It'd be fascinating to see how this plays out.
Olivia, how have the Conservatives reacted this morning? And do you think, as the year goes on and we move closer to the pending election, that the Tories may come back with their own defence commitments to maybe even trump Labour's announcement?
Well, surely the Conservatives will have to offer something for defence. That 3% target has been refused time and again by the Chancellor, but at every opportunity he says that it is a sort of intention of the government. One day down the line, the Conservatives would like to see defence spending raised to 3% of GDP. Well, given the state of the polls at the moment, I would think that the Conservatives would now say that is the moment to promise that 3%. They need to show that they are strong in areas which the Conservatives traditionally own, areas like defence and taxation. There probably won't be another budget before the next election, but I think we can expect to see some pretty strong manifesto commitments on defence from the Conservatives.
The Defence Secretary, Olivia, Grant Shapps, he, as you might expect, is saying that it is an attempted distraction from the Angela Rayner scandal. He's calling it a scandal, but amongst the public, I'm not really sure this so-called scandal is cutting through.
I think that's a really interesting question, Pip, because as you say, it is possible that it isn't really cutting through. I mean, it's said in Westminster that, if you can't explain a scandal in less than a sentence, then it just won't get through to the public. And I think the problem with the Angela Rayner case is that it is quite complicated. Whether it's true that Labour is coming up with this huge defence plan today simply in order to distract from what's going on with Angela Rayner, well, I think I'm a little bit sceptical about that. But there are some valid criticisms coming from Conservatives who I've spoken to who've said that essentially the Labour plan for defence spending just isn't costed. Up until today, John Healey, the Shadow Defence Secretary, refused to put a number to the defence spending plans for Labour because he said that they needed to do a thorough review of defence spending at the moment before they made any sort of monetary commitment. Well, that promise, that review seems to have gone out of the window now. There seems to be pressure coming from somewhere for Labour to put their money where their mouth is on defence. But if that policy isn't costed, could we see it be diluted over the next months as we head towards a general election?
Political correspondent Olivia Utley, thank you for now.
Yeah, how long until the flip-flop? It's interesting because defence spending never used to be a big vote winner, did it? But, of course, in these testing times internationally, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Gaza, etc., seems to be, up the list of priorities for governments and looming governments, with Labour's case. Anyway, up next, as we have a falling birth rate in Britain and, of course, around the world, people just aren't having enough babies, are they? Is it right to criticise anyone in their 40s having a child? Let us know what you think. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Offline and overlooked. That's what Age UK say millions of British pensioners are. Why? Because they cannot or won't access the internet. It's leading to digital exclusion. So the charities campaigning for public services like banks, utilities and even the NHS to maintain a more human approach.
Everything's online. People assume you've got a smartphone with a mobile number and an email, and without that you don't exist in this world anymore. We've got to try and get the government to see that it's so important to make people feel that they belong, because there's a feeling that the older generation just feel that they're forgotten, they're in the way, and we already know that anyway, but it's just another reason for them to feel that they're not wanted. They'll just accept it and they'll say, well, that's it, I can't do it anymore. And that's it, whereas other people would be really kicking and screaming. So we need to be the voice for older people.
Despite digital technology playing an increasing role in our lives, around 1 in 5 over 65s in the UK don't use the internet. Thornycroft Centre in Pontefract, West Yorkshire, provides a space for this age group to socialise and get help to go online.
I'm not that good with mobiles, so when you mention anything about online, I ain't a clue what you're talking about.
The closure of thousands of banks is also detrimental to the older generation.
A lot of our members what come, they tend to use cash. They don't like to use bank cards. I think a lot of it's trust or the lack of knowledge. They don't understand how it works. I think they're very vulnerable as well with online. It's really important that they're aware how to use it and how to use it safely.
So, in an online era, it's still crucial for many to have an offline option.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9:50, you with Ben and Pip on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Now, big question and a loaded one. Is it selfish to have children over the age of 40?
This has been all over the news in recent days because of BBC broadcaster Rachel Burden's comments. Now, she already has 3 children at 41 and felt selfish for having another child.
Yeah, and with falling birth rates in Britain and, of course, around the world, shouldn't we be encouraging more people to have babies in their 40s? Well, joining us now, Lucy Baker. She's the founder of the Geriatric Mum blog. Good morning to you, Lucy. What's your take then? Is it selfish to have kids in your 40s?
Well, I think you're probably going to know what I'm going to say on this one, being the founder of Geriatric Mum blog. So, no, not selfish. I have 3 children now. I had my first at 34, my second at 37, so technically geriatric, some might say, and my third baby at 43. It was the right time for me. I really wanted to add to our family, or me and my husband wanted to add to our family. And it was not a selfish move. It was a family move. I don't think it's selfish. You know,
Why would it be selfish? Why did the BBC broadcaster say that?
Well, I think to be fair to her, it wasn't she was saying selfish about not being an older mum per se. It was more about the fact that she was already a mother of 3 and at the age that she was, wanted to extend her family further into having a 4th child.
Yeah, no, I understand where she's coming from, but I think the word selfish, and I think the way that women are branded right or wrong, you know, you can't do anything right as a woman these days. And I think that's a really hard thing to sort of take on. And through this geriatric mum journey that I've been on, because I've started the blog and I've met loads of older women, older mums, I should say, over the years, there is never one reason why women have babies later on in life. There's so many different sort of reasons behind the scenes. So sort of just making a sweeping statement that women are being selfish having babies later, I think is wrong. But I don't know. I mean, everyone has a personal choice. But actually saying that, some people don't have the choice to have children in their 30s or even their 20s. You know, there's lots of, like I said before, there's lots of reasons why women have babies later on in life. But I mean, I added to the family, you know, we had 2 kids already. I had another baby a few years later at 43. I'm 48 now. The baby's now in school. So he's a little boy, he's 5. And lots of people, when they found out I was pregnant, everyone gave me lots of negativity. You know, oh my God, you're going to be 47 when the baby starts school. You're going to be tired. You're going to feel old. All of that stuff. And do you know what? I'm in the really best place I've ever been in my life. I'm sort of confident. I'm calm. I'm together. And I think it was a brilliant thing. And I don't in any way, shape or form feel like it was a selfish move.
Did you feel, Lucy, if I can just ask, did you feel a little bit more nervous about having a child in your 40s because of the increased health risk? I mean, we do see, I think it was the Hollywood actress Hilary Swank. She had twins last year in her mid-40s. That is quite unusual. Is it risky?
Well, I mean, that was one of the reasons why I started the blog, actually, Pip. It's a good question because there is more risk attached to having a baby later on in life, and it's well documented. But actually, even at 37, I had a really tricky pregnancy. And even at 34, I had a really tricky birth. So I've had different situations throughout my life, and they haven't always been attached to age. But going back to your main question, you know, you go online, or I did when I was pregnant at 42, risk. It was, you know, risk of preeclampsia and all sorts of things. And it did hold me back a little bit in the way that I was kind of accepting the pregnancy, if that makes sense. But what I started to realise was, actually, I'm in a good place. I'm under consultant care because over 40, they give you consultant care in the UK. I felt really well supported. I was looking after myself way more than I did in my 30s.
OK, Lucy...
And I actually had a really lovely pregnancy when I was 42, so it was good for me.
Sorry to interrupt, Lucy. We have to go, but really...
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. A bit of a north-south split as we go through today and into the weekend. Some dry, fine weather towards the south, wetter further north. This morning there are heavy outbreaks of rain pushing across parts of Northern Ireland into northern England and across the bulk of Scotland, though northeastern parts clinging on to some sunshine into the afternoon. Do watch out for some strong gusty winds in the northwest. Across the bulk of England and Wales, lots of fine and at times sunny weather into this afternoon, and temperatures rising to highs of around 20, 21, possibly even 22 Celsius towards the southeast. Everywhere, temperatures will be well above average for the time of year. Sticking with the north-south split as we go through the end of the day and into tomorrow, further rain across northern parts, particularly across the borders area, likely to see some heavy bursts for a time and showers feeding in from the northwest. Staying drier towards the south, and there will be some clear skies, but quite a bit of cloud, and we have mild air across us, so temperatures not dropping a huge amount for most places. Through Saturday itself then, a bit of cloud bringing some drizzly rain across northern and western parts of England and Wales perhaps. Towards the southeast though, lots of fine and at times sunny weather again. The more unsettled picture will be once more across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here some hefty showery rain pushing its way through, and temperatures for many will be down a touch compared to today. As we go into Sunday, and we're going to see further showers which could be heavy at times across northern areas, drier towards the south, but temperatures dropping compared to recent.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. The M6 in Cumbria is closed northbound from junction 39 at Shap up to 40 at Penrith, where a lorry's overturned. There are queues towards the closure. Delays as you divert, and the outside lane is also closed southbound past the scene. And there's also a lane closed southbound at junction 39 at Shap after a separate accident there. In Staffordshire, the A444 is blocked at Stappen Hill for emergency pothole repairs, causing delays. In the West Midlands, New Street is closed off Ednam Road in Dudley for an investigation. On the M2 in Kent, there's a lane closed eastbound where someone's broken down between junctions 5 and 6 from Sittingbourne to Faversham, causing delays. And in Dorset, the A350 is blocked southbound by an accident on Sturt Road off the Halls Bay roundabout in Poole, causing delays. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is your chance to win our biggest prize of the year so far. First, there's a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash for you to spend this summer. Then, we want to send you on a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. Thanks to Variety Cruises, you'll be able to choose from any of their 2025 Greek adventures and discover Greece like never before. And with flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, all you have to do is relax. We'll also give you these terrific travel treats. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Very good morning. It is 10 a.m. on Friday, the 12th of April. Great to have your company this morning. This is Britain's Newsroom with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson.
Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Now, do we offer enough for our veterans? Rishi Sunak is launching an employment plan today to help get them into high-paid jobs after they leave the forces. But is it enough?
The government say that Operation Prosper will make Britain the best place in the world to be a veteran. But Labour say that they have failed the veterans community.
Keeping Britain safe, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer pledges the UK's nuclear deterrent is the bedrock of his plans to keep the country protected.
Labour is trying to pitch itself as the party of defence, but does Keir Starmer really have the cash to put his money where his mouth is?
And reaction to the death of former NFL and Hollywood star O.J. Simpson. He was acquitted, remember, infamously of 2 murders, but later found liable for their deaths in a civil lawsuit.
Former Post Office boss Alan Cook is giving evidence now at the Post Office inquiry. These are live pictures. We'll bring you the latest.
And WhatsApp age change. Social media giant Meta's under fire for lowering the minimum age for WhatsApp from 16 to 13. Is it irresponsible?
Prince William and Prince George were spotted at Villa Park last night. It's their first appearance since the Princess of Wales told us about her cancer diagnosis. Villa 1, 2, 1. Come on, me babbies!
You're a Brummie. Brought out your inner Brummie there.
It's result, Bob. It's great. We love a Villa win.
It was meant to be me reading that section of the menu out, and I said to the producer, I'm not doing it because A, I'm an Arsenal fan, and B, the other week when Villa played Man City, they put a second team out allowing City to demolish them. I refuse to do it.
Just congratulate Villa on their 2-1 win.
Well done,
Great
Villa.
Result.
Well done, you Brummies.
Maybe Princes William and George brought that good luck last night. Let us know about all your thoughts about what is going on today. What else have we got coming up? Oh, we've got former Grand National winner Barry Geraghty talking about the festival.
The greatest show on turf, as they call it. Tomorrow, the big race. Who's going to win? Have you got your bets on?
Nope, don't do it.
No? Oh, you're not a fan of the racing, are you?
We'll have this conversation,
Yeah,
Ben,
we'll get stuck into it.
very shortly. Do let us know what you think. gbnews.com/my say. Let's get your headlines now with Sam Francis.
Pip and Ben, thank you very much, and good morning to you from the newsroom at 2 minutes past 10. Leading the news this morning, Sir Keir Starmer is expected to say that Britain's nuclear deterrent is the bedrock of Labour's plan to keep the country safe. The Labour leader is visiting Barrow-in-Furness today, where nuclear submarines are being built. He's expected to reaffirm his party's commitment to defence spending with a pledge to boost investment and strengthen Britain's security and economic growth if Labour wins the next election. The government, though, has dismissed the visit as a distraction. But Shadow Defence Minister Luke Pollard says bolstering the nation's defences is an economic opportunity.
When economic conditions allow, we hope to get to 2.5% of GDP on defence, making sure that we can support those men and women in our armed forces, have the equipment and the capabilities that they need to deter aggression, but if necessary, defeat an opponent in war. And that is what Keir is setting out today.
Britain is turning an economic corner, that's according to the Chancellor, after the nation's output grew by 0.1% in February. The Office for National Statistics also revised January's figure, pushing it up to 0.3%. The latest figures suggest Britain is coming out of recession, with significant improvements across manufacturing, particularly in the car sector. In other news, Lord Cameron has warned Iran against drawing the Middle East into a wider conflict. The Foreign Secretary spoke to his Iranian counterpart following threats made by Tehran against Israel. There are concerns that an Israeli airstrike that killed 2 Iranian generals last week could provoke a retaliation. Meanwhile, the US has told its officials and their families in Israel not to travel outside 3 areas: Tel Aviv, Jerusalem and Beersheba. The Defence Secretary says that a new British military laser could be on Ukraine's front line by 2027 to help take down Russian drones. Grant Shapps claims the weapon will have huge ramifications for the conflict. The so-called Dragonfire is capable of cutting through its targets with an intense beam of light. It comes after the age of conscription in Ukraine was lowered last week by 2 years to 25 in an effort to help replenish troops. Rishi Sunak is launching an employment plan which aims to help veterans secure high-paid jobs after they leave the armed forces. More than £2 million is being put into what's been called the Op Prosper scheme, which will help people transfer their skills developed in the military. Businesses across areas including cyber, digital and in manufacturing are being encouraged to play their part. Well, as we've been hearing, the former managing director of the Post Office has apologised today to wrongly convicted sub-postmasters for his involvement in the Horizon IT scandal. If you're watching on television, you can see here live pictures from that Post Office inquiry where Alan Cook is currently speaking. He said that he wants to most strongly put on record his personal apology to all of those affected, including their families. It comes after Cook had previously said he didn't know about any problems with the Horizon software until shortly before he left his role at the Post Office. Well, between 1999 and 2015, more than 900 sub-postmasters were prosecuted due to that flawed IT system. Access to funding for farmers hit by bad weather is to be widened amid fears that the effects of climate change are creating a crisis for British agriculture. Grants of up to £25,000 were initially only available to those within 150 metres of a main river that had been flooded. The National Farmers Union, though, has welcomed the broadening of access to the funds, but says that the impact of poor weather on British farms goes far beyond the recent Storm Henk. A man due in court is due in court rather later with the murder of a mother who was killed while pushing her baby in a pram. 27-year-old Kalasuma Atka was killed in Bradford on Saturday afternoon. The child she was with was not harmed. Habibur Massam, who's 25 and from Burnley, appeared before magistrates yesterday and is now due at Crown Court today. A group of MPs is calling on the government to develop a strategy to help combat misinformation aimed at young people on the social platform TikTok. Ofcom data suggests that 1 in 10 children aged between 12 and 15 use the platform as their main source of news, despite concerns over the Chinese government's influence on the app. The recommendation is part of a wider report emphasising the need for more trusted voices like scientists and doctors to help combat conspiracy theories on the platform. TikTok says it does welcome the idea. Social media giant Meta is under fire today for lowering the minimum age on WhatsApp from 16 to 13. Campaigners say the move is tone-deaf and irresponsible. However, Meta says the changes do bring the app's age limit in line with most countries and that protections are in place. It comes as the tech firm, which also owns Facebook and Instagram, unveiled a range of new safety features, including automatic blurring features on intimate images. That filter will be on by default for those aged and under 18. Well, for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code there on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. For now, though, it's back to Pip and Ben.
Well, thanks very much.
Sorry,
welcome.
Ladies first.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson.
Yeah, we've got some emails flying in, not least on having kids in your 40s. Gordon, good morning, Gordon. You say, providing the mother is healthy and the age is irrelevant. Providing the mother is healthy, the age is irrelevant to becoming a mother again. And Tim says, why can't women decide for themselves when they have kids? It's nobody else's business.
Maddie says, I don't think age should be a consideration when planning children, as we all live longer now. It's down to, can you afford to care for your child and not to rely on benefits? This is all relates to Rachel Burden, the broadcaster's comments, where she'd already got 3 children and she had a 4th when she was in her 40s. And also, we're all at different stages in our lives at 40. You know, many women may not have even at the age of 40, may not have met the person that they want to have a child with. Their life circumstances might be different. They might not have been seized by that desire to have a baby.
And arguably, you could be a better mother. You've got more life experience, you've travelled the world, perhaps, you've worked. Shelley says something akin to that. She says, I had my first at 39, my second at 41. I think I've made a better mother to my children because of all my life experience. My kids are thriving and I'm not doing so badly myself. And actually, my mum had me when she was nearly 41 and I turned out all right, didn't I? Don't answer that.
We'll ask your mum. Ben's mum, get in touch with us. And Malcolm, your comment has cracked me up. I don't think it's selfish to have children over the age of 40, but it is better to get them to leave home before the big 4-0. I think many people would concur with that. Thank you for all your thoughts. Keep them coming in. gbnews.com/your say.
OK, it's 10 minutes past 10. Rishi Sunak has today pledged £2.1 million to help veterans into high-paid jobs after they leave the armed forces under a scheme called Operation Prosper.
While the veteran employment rate is 89%, thousands are still thought to slip through the cracks after leaving the forces.
So joining us now is Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, a defence analyst and former British Army officer. Good morning to you. Is this a drop in the ocean? £2.1 million. Some are saying that it's not enough. It doesn't touch the sides to help our much-needed vets.
Well, I mean, I think that's the sort of standard response to every government initiative these days, that it's not enough. But I would say it's a step in the right direction, and it's a start. It probably doesn't go far enough, but at least we have a foot on the ladder, if you like. I mean, I think the basis is that in our society, we have a duty of care and responsibility to look after those who have been willing to put themselves in harm's way on our behalf. And so when they exit the services, we should have a mechanism in place to make sure that their transition to civilian life is as easy as we can make it. The good news is that most people don't fall flat on their faces, but it can take some people quite a long time to make that transition and to find a steady job or steady employment back in civilian life.
But we do hear, Stuart, about homelessness amongst military veterans increasing in England, and also an issue with young people that are forced to leave the service, be it for medical reasons, disciplinary reasons. I mean, I've heard stories about how they have to find housing at really short notice, sometime on the same day. It's all right putting money into it, but with those sorts of issues, shouldn't there be a proper roadmap for veterans?
Oh, I mean, I would agree, absolutely. I think that politicians are very fond of saying they've put X amount of money into such and such, but they never say whether they think the money's been spent wisely. What I would like to see, and what I've been talking about for longer than I care to remember, is that I think guaranteed employment and housing should be a condition of service. When you sign up, say, after 10 years, you should be guaranteed a job and guaranteed housing. And it's not rocket science to set that up. It just needs the leadership to implement it.
Stuart, what do you make of Sir Keir Starmer's, I'd call it an announcement, but he's kind of said that he may row back on it if finances aren't in check. What do you make of his announcement about defence spending? He's going to up it to 2.5% if they win the election.
Well, I think that that's a classic sort of Prime Minister in waiting announcement. And he basically is seizing the high ground on defence, probably recognising that the Conservative government has been weak on defence and has left the state of the British Armed Forces in fairly parlous condition in many cases. Everybody would like it upped to 2.5% or more. The Polish government has increased its defence spending to 4% of GDP. And there's a lot of stuff that has to be done to sort out the lack of investment over the past 2 decades. And so 2.5% is again, it's a good start, but it's not going to fill the gap.
I think the former Armed Forces Minister James Heappey wants it to be 3% by 2030.
Yes, I mean 3% would be much better, but there's stacks of stuff to be done, and of course the defence budget is competing against all the other critical budgets which the government has to administer.
How vulnerable are we, Stuart, in terms of our enemies across the world, Russia, China. Are we really that ill-equipped to defend ourselves?
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is that the British Armed Forces are neither big enough nor fully equipped with the correct equipment to take on a peer or near-peer enemy. And certainly we couldn't take on Russia on our own. However, we do have NATO, which basically guarantees that any attack on the UK, certainly in Europe, will bring in the US and Canada and other NATO countries to our assistance. So I don't think we're alone, but we should be able to put, for example, in the army, we should be able to put an armoured division in the field, and that's maybe 15 to 20,000 personnel with equipment. At the moment, we're hard pressed to put a brigade in the field, and that's about 3,500 people plus equipment. So we're not in good condition in terms of our armed forces.
Are you confident, or how confident are you that Sir Keir Starmer will make what you believe are the right decisions if he becomes Prime Minister?
Well, I'm very hopeful that he will, and I think that he has signalled his intent to be armed forces friendly, defence friendly, if you like. But when he becomes Prime Minister, as undoubtedly he appears to that he will, then there'll be so many other competing demands on both his time and the budget that he has to administer that we'll just have to wait and see. But I'm optimistic rather than confident.
OK. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, defence analyst and former British Army officer, thank you so much. Sir Keir Starmer, of course, as well, vowing to keep nuclear weapons and even boost and bolster Trident. So interesting to see whether he will indeed stick to that if and when he makes office.
We want to take you now to the Post Office inquiry, where former Post Office boss Alan Cook, who oversaw the prosecution of 160 sub-postmasters, he is currently giving evidence. Hopefully we can go to those live pictures. This is the inquiry into the Horizon IT scandal. He has begun, we understand, by offering a personal apology, most strongly to affected sub-postmasters, saying it's very important for him to say that up front. Let's hear a little bit now.
You would have seen this at the time, wouldn't you?
Yes. So the screen's just gone blank, actually.
Yes, it's
oh, okay.
Just...
Yeah, right.
And £48,000, that's a significant loss to the business, isn't it?
Yep. Yes.
And the idea of these investigation reports is that you get them on a monthly basis. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it enables the executive team to trace through from the point of a loss is found right through to the outcome of the case. Correct?
Yes, sorry.
Is it not the case that whilst this case was going through and you received updates on it, at some point you would have been told that a decision had been made to prosecute?
Well, I think not really. I don't think that's the case. These cases were reported on, and if they went, and as I said, the terminology, and it's even used in that particular paper, went to court.
Well, they went to court, didn't they? Even
yes.
if the Post Office made the decision, the case went to court.
Well, those two things don't quite go together. So it went to court. I had not assumed that we might have wanted it to go to court, but I didn't realise that we had the power back then to take it to court, regardless of what anybody else might think.
OK, that was former Post Office boss Alan Cook, who was managing director of the group from 2006 to 2010. He's giving evidence live at the Post Office inquiry in London on the Horizon IT scandal. We're going to bring you more updates on that as the day goes on. He started his evidence by offering an apology for everything that happened, and he said his sympathies are with all the sub-postmasters, their families, who are affected by the scandal.
Yeah, he's not the only person appearing today. Adam Crozier, the former CEO of Royal Mail Group Limited, former director of Royal Mail Holdings. He will also appear at the inquiry a little later. We will, as Ben says, bring you the latest here on GB News.
All right, still to come. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, they've had 2 new Netflix shows commissioned. Can you guess what they're about? One is about sport, and the other is about something Meghan likes to get up to in her spare time. Can you guess? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stay with us.
Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Cheryl Baker. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
When you think back to 1981, I mean, obviously the ABBA victory then wasn't all that long ago, 9 years earlier. Do you think they had a huge influence then on the sort of direction that Eurovision was taking?
Yeah, they did. They changed it completely. Because up to then, it had all been very staid and a bit posh, long frock, sticky bow ties, you know. And then they came along and they blew it out of the water. They looked so different. And they modernised it. And I think, yeah, it made a big change. Made a big change after that.
And we were watching your performance on Eurovision a little bit earlier on of making your mind up. I mean, you had so much fun, didn't you, up on that stage? Were you, in some part, inspired by ABBA?
Yes, I would say so. It was, ABBA was 74. I turned professional in 75 and did my first song for Europe, which was, you know, when they choose the British song to go forward. I did my first one in February 1976. So, yeah. It was only months after ABBA's performance that I started my own Eurovision journey. Yeah, they just changed the face of it. They changed the face of Eurovision. And if you look at what Eurovision is now, I think that all started with ABBA's performance. It made people think this is much more than just a song contest. It's all about the look. I mean, the clothes, they looked fantastic. And even the composer, or not the composer, what's he called? The conductor. He was dressed as Napoleon. It made it fun. Fantastic song, obviously. Brilliant singing. But the whole look of it just changed the way that Eurovision is, and to this day.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. It is 10:23. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson.
Welcome. We're joined now by political commentator Emma Webb and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner in the studio. We're going to get stuck into some of the day's newspapers and top stories. Shall we start with Amy? Harry and Meghan's new lifestyle and polo shows announced by Netflix. What can you tell us?
Well, we have all been waiting with bated breath, haven't we, to see what will they do next?
Yeah, right.
Since their last Netflix endeavour. They're on that big 5-year deal, which is worth about £1 bazillion. So I think Netflix is really keen to get some good content out of the pair. So what have they gone with? Well, they've gone with Meghan's going to do a show about cooking, gardening and lifestyle. She's going to produce it. It sounds a bit rubbish to start with, but then I read that it is being produced by the guys that made Chef's Table and that Pepsi Stole My Jet. That was quite good. Those quite good documentaries. So could be OK, but I didn't know Meghan could cook. Maybe she's getting chefs on board. And then
we didn't know Brooklyn Beckham could cook. And look at
and
what
then
he's doing.
And then he made that excellent cheese sandwich, didn't he?
Look how his profile's increased even more. I mean, it might be, if it's well produced, you know, everybody will want to gawp at, if it's filmed at her home, they'll want to gawp at the kitchen and gawp at the garden and
she's
everything.
back into lifestyle, because she originally had the TIG lifestyle website, and then I think Emma was telling me she's got a new blog. What's the blog Riviera called? Orchard. Riviera Orchard.
All ties in nicely.
So Meghan's in the kitchen and Harry is getting back out on the polo field and is going to be making a documentary about the secret world behind polo.
So I read that's going to be something in the theme of... Have you seen Drive to Survive on Netflix, the Formula One documentary? behind the scenes, all the sort of action and bravado. So maybe something
What
like
is
that.
the action behind Polo?
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly.
You should watch the programme and find out, Amy.
What you forget is Netflix is a worldwide audience. OK, maybe not everybody in the UK will like Polo, but it is played in dozens of countries all over the world.
Yeah.
And is very popular. So
and it could be
an audience
interesting
for it somewhere. I mean, what if, you know, great telly if Harry falls off a horse.
And I remember
I would watch the Polo series.
What was the Queen's Gambit? That made chess interesting. So, you know, any subject can be made interesting. So
Any
let's
subject, like
see what you do.
chess or polo.
So, do you remember Somme about wine?
Well, Emma, that's the
Like-
point, isn't it? They could make documentaries or films about slugs in their kitchen, and it would be a hit because people
Don't give them ideas.
People just want to see what they're up to, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, some people will watch it because they're genuinely interested, or some people like me will go up because they want to see what sort of is the latest ridiculous thing that they've got themselves up to while they're trying to sort of bleed talent from a stone.
Do you think the royal family will get a mention?
I think. Well, I mean, possibly on the polo side of things. I find it very difficult to imagine, given that that's their whole USP, that they're not going to find a way to shoehorn that connection in there somewhere.
Or Meghan might.
Because otherwise, there's
I've
no
actually
reason why
got an
anyone would
idea.
want to watch them.
Do you remember what the Queen bought baby Archie for Christmas that year? It was a waffle maker, right? Meghan was like, yeah, I shouldn't really say, but I'm going to tell you the Queen bought Archie a waffle maker, so maybe we could actually see the waffle maker in
Or
action
Meghan may
on the
drop a
cooking
bombshell.
programme.
She might reveal that she was oppressed when in the royal family and she wasn't allowed to cook an omelette or something at Kensington Palace. Should we move on to our second story? So, Police Scotland have been given a script defending Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf after he faced a deluge of hate crime reports, of course, off the back of the SNP's new controversial legislation. So they're getting so many phone calls, Amy, about comments that Humza Yousaf has made previously, particularly about white people, that they've had a script written for them to just dish out to all the complainants.
Well, I think in the first day after this bill went through, there was 3,000 complaints, wasn't there? Now, we've already got a massively overstretched police force, so there was always going to be a bit of an issue. I think a lot of people are very confused about this bill. They can't really see what it's adding. I think it's the whole stirring up hate bit of it. So it says any comment that stirs up hate, and then people are taking this and they're thinking, well, that's quite subjective, isn't it? The reception from the press was absolutely terrible, despite the bill having cross-party support to actually get through Hollywood. But I personally feel like it wasn't necessary. Like, the way to stop these types of comments surely is through education and awareness rather than trying to police people's speech.
And if Police Scotland staff have been given a script, Emma, it suggests that they don't really understand what the bill is about in the first place.
This story is extraordinary, and I think it's a perfect encapsulation of the core of the problem with this piece of legislation. Because obviously the way that hate crime is reported is that it's from the perception of the person who is offended by whatever has been said or feels insulted by it. And so a lot of people feeling insulted by Humza Yousaf's famous white speech said that that was racist. Elon Musk even said that that was racist on X. And people have therefore been reporting this in such numbers that he has then felt it necessary to provide, or they have felt it necessary to provide a script defending Yousaf's comments. And part of the defence is that it was to do with his own experience of racism and it wasn't meant to be disparaging. Now, anybody else who is having hate crime reported that they have allegedly committed obviously doesn't have the privilege of being able to provide a script defending them, saying, oh, no, your perception is incorrect, actually. You may have felt insulted. You may have felt, this may have been your experience of anti-white racism, but actually this is what he intended. So for everybody else in Scotland, intention doesn't count, but for the First Minister it does.
Yeah, can you imagine if anyone, Boris Johnson, stood on the lectern and said, there's too many black people in public positions or too many Asians in public positions in this country? He would be cancelled immediately. I would be, and for some reason...
Well, Boris Johnson made some questionable comments in the past and he wasn't cancelled.
And also, it's completely different.
About burqas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many things.
You know, he was never cancelled.
No, absolutely not. The things he got away with was... But I don't think you can compare saying, you know, that about an ethnic minority and that about white people. You know, it's not really comparable. Because they're not completely underrepresented in society.
But Scotland is what? I mean, it's over 90%...
94% white.
So it's just simply not the case. They've got an ethnic minority First Minister, for crying out loud. It's not that they're underrepresented in any way. It would be shocking if there weren't white people in almost every single room in Scotland.
I think the thing is that everybody knows that that comment was not stirring up hatred to incite any violence, and that's very clear. And the thing about this bill is
that blatantly racist.
The thing about this bill is if people actually gave it a chance, the threshold is extremely, extremely high, but because it's been hijacked and now people are essentially trolling the bill by ringing up and saying...
They're not trolling the bill. They're not trolling the bill.
They're not genuinely concerned that Humza Yousaf is going to start violence against white people.
I think if someone feels that what he said was racist, then even the Police Scotland had their own webpage reported. I think they ended up having to take it down because they had been disparaging towards young white men. The point is that he has the ability to defend himself, whereas other people in Scotland don't. So it doesn't matter, what the intention was behind it. It's about by their own standards, it's about perception. And so he's allowed to defend himself, but all sorts of people will be having hate crimes reported against them, and they don't have the ability to defend themselves.
What about the time being spent on this by call centre workers when people just want to ring up and report, a burglary?
Yeah, no, I agree, but it makes me slightly frustrated that this well-intentioned bill that could potentially do good because of this very, very high threshold has been hijacked and is now being used to make a example of the First Minister, perhaps unnecessarily.
OK.
People are wasting time, basically.
Thank you both for now. We're not wasting your time this morning. We're bringing you the latest headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you from the newsroom. 10:31, the headlines this half hour. Sir Keir Starmer says that Britain's nuclear deterrent is the bedrock of Labour's plan to keep the country safe. The Labour leader is visiting Barrow-in-Furness today, where nuclear submarines are being built. He's expected to reaffirm his party's commitment to defence spending with a pledge to boost investment and strengthen Britain's security and economic growth if Labour wins the next election. The government, though, has dismissed those plans as a distraction. But Sir Keir Starmer says it's an essential step in the face of rising global threats and growing Russian aggression. Britain is turning an economic corner, that's according to the Chancellor, after the nation's output grew by 0.1% in February. The Office for National Statistics is also revising January's figure, pushing it up to 0.3%. Those latest figures suggest that Britain is coming out of recession with significant improvements across manufacturing, particularly in the car sector. Lord Cameron has warned Iran against drawing the Middle East into a wider conflict. The Foreign Secretary spoke to his Iranian counterpart following threats made by Tehran against Israel. There are also concerns that an Israeli airstrike that killed 2 Iranian generals last week could provoke retaliation. Meanwhile, the US has told its officials and their families in Israel not to travel outside of 3 areas. And social media giant Meta has been criticised for lowering the minimum age on WhatsApp from 16 to 13. Campaigners say the move is tone-deaf and irresponsible. However, Meta says it will bring the app's age limit in line with most countries and insists protections are in place. It comes as the tech firm, which also owns Facebook and Instagram, unveiled a range of new safety features, including automatic protections against inappropriate images, which will be switched on by default for those under 18. Those are the latest headlines from the newsroom. Do sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2510 and 1.1722 euros. The price of gold is currently £1,918 and 45 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,024 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come here on Britain's Newsroom, the new Bridget Jones movie. It is about to start being filmed. It is due out sometime next year. But how's it aged? Because there was plenty of jokes, lots of fat-shaming that went on in the previous Bridget Jones movies.
Are people getting upset by it now?
I just don't think you could get away with it now. I think it's going to be a very different script. And for the first time, it's being directed by a fella. We're going to be talking about that next. Do stay with us. Ben can't wait.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. The M6 in Cumbria is closed northbound from junction 39 at Shap up to 40, the A66 at Penrith after a lorry overturned. There are queues towards the closure, delays as you divert, and the outside lane is also closed southbound past the scene. In Staffordshire, the A444 is blocked for emergency pothole repairs off Bridge Street in Stappen Hill, causing delays. In the West Midlands, New Street in Dudley is closed off Ednam Road for an investigation. In Powys, the A4067 remains closed in both directions at Astrid Gunlight. There's a landslip that's been closed since Monday night, and there are delays of up to 50 minutes with some cancelled southbound Thameslink train services in London between St Pancras and Blackfriars after an earlier faulty train. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, many words were used to describe Bridget Jones. She was only 9.5 stone and a size 12, but there was regular talk of fat shaming. She only seemed to think she could get a fella if she was a lot slimmer. And she recorded her weight in her diary every day. Those of us who've watched the films remember it very well, don't we, Ben?
I was just saying off air, I've never seen it, and it's not my kind of thing. I saw About a Boy and Love Actually. But I've never seen. I know what Bridget Jones is about, but I've never seen it. It's not my bag. But let's remind ourselves, and me, of the early 2000s classic rom-com.
I decided to take control of my life and start a diary to tell the truth about Bridget Jones. The whole truth. Resolution number 1. Obviously, we'll lose £20. Number 2. Always put last night's pants in the laundry basket. Equally important, we'll find nice, sensible boyfriend to go out with.
Obviously, we'll lose £20. Give me a break. That is not going to fly
Well, it said there that
not in 2024.
It said she was smoking 42 cigarettes a day, so I'm not surprised that she wasn't losing weight.
Well,
surely you should be if you're chuffing that many.
What is the new British Jones... British? Well, it is British, but it's also called Bridget Jones film going to be like? Is the concept outdated? We're told that Gen Z, well, they're apparently already planning to boycott it.
Oh, goodness me. OK. Is it body shaming, or should the wokey snowflakes get off from criticising our new rom-coms? Joining us now to debate this is author and broadcaster Rebecca Reid and journalist and author Julie Cook. Good morning to you both. Rebecca, we'll start with you. Are they just going to turn this into some woke fest and kill all the fun of the original Bridget Jones?
So the original Bridget Jones was a column written in The Independent, a left-wing newspaper, by a left-wing writer called Helen Fielding about a left-wing woman who voted Labour called Bridget Jones. So the idea that you'd be wokeifying it by making her somehow socially conscious is laughable. She was always socially conscious. She was always, she has a gay best friend, which in the 90s was fairly surprising. Of course, yes, she was obsessed with her weight. Find me a woman who isn't, privately or publicly, a bit obsessed with her weight. So there is no suggestion this is...
But Rebecca, let me just interrupt you. The people of the left persuasion from, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago, they'd be called far right today. The left have gone so far left that everything's skewed.
That's sort of completely not true. And also, I'm wondering where you're getting the idea that Gen Z plan to boycott this film. This is a film about a 54-year-old woman. I don't think many 17-year-olds are going to go and see it because it's about a middle-aged woman with kids who are the age of 17. So I'm interested to know where you're getting the idea that Gen Z are going to boycott this film, other than that it's not really targeted at them.
Journalist and author Julie Cook, good to see you as well. What does this script need to contain? I'm hearing, which I'm liking the sounds of, that she's going to have a 30-year-old toy boy.
Well, yeah, I read that too, and I think that sounds quite nice. Listen, I'm of the generation that read the books and saw the films the first time around. I'm 47 this year. You know, this was my thing. I think she really represented at the time what life was really like for our generation of women. You know, I was working in an office in London. It really resonated with me, everything that she went through. And yes, I can understand why people are worried why it might not work now, because I do think that a lot of the stuff that we got away with back then simply wouldn't be in a film today. I don't think they would, as you mentioned, I don't think they could get away with the sort of what we would call now fat shaming. You know, Bridget Jones would now be seen as completely skinny, wouldn't she, by the way we live now. But I think it was a product of its era, a product of its time. I'm slightly concerned how it will evolve to work now. As our other guest said, it's probably not actually aimed at Gen Z anyway. You know, they're going to be the sort of the children of the people who are going to watch this. But I can't see how it's going to really evolve to work today, really.
What do you think, Rebecca? Can it work? I mean, it's still going to have a legion of fans, isn't it?
Well, of course it is, but also the whole joke was that this was a woman who owned a flat in West London, had a high-level job in publishing and weighed 9 stone, and she still felt she was fat, unsuccessful and a loser. That was the whole point then, and it's the whole point now. It's about the way that you see yourself as a woman, and that's why it's still... I read it. I'm 32. I read it when I was in my teens. I've read it in my 30s. The reason it always applies is that as a woman, you always feel that you're getting it wrong, even on the things where
don't you think that was an unhealthy message to convey, that when you're just over 9 stone and a size 12, that you're fat and that you need to lose weight?
But that's not the message. The message is that you can be very thin and still feel like your body isn't good enough. And there's a massive gap between how other people see her and how she sees herself. But also, literature and films don't have to set good examples or send a good message. She's an interesting, flawed, fully formed character, and not everything you put on screen is an endorsement. If you make a film about Hitler, you're not saying we love Hitler. You're making a portrayal of or in that case, a historical character. It is perfectly fine to portray somebody on screen without them having to be morally perfect. And nobody, particularly the left, is asking for that.
OK, Rebecca, Julie, thank you so much. Appreciate you being with us. We're just going to bring you some breaking news now. Police have launched an investigation into Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner. She, of course, has come under the spotlight in recent weeks over the sale of an ex-council house that she previously owned in Stockport, and she's been accused of avoiding capital gains tax on it, something she has denied. But Greater Manchester Police have just released a statement. They've said, "We are investigating whether any offences have been committed. This follows a reassessment of the information provided to us by Mr Daly. Mr Daly, James Daly, is of course the Conservative MP for Bury North.
And there has been no comment so far from Angela Rayner. Well, still to come, one of the biggest races in the world takes place tomorrow, the Grand National. And there was quite a few protesters there last year trying to block the race. What's going to happen tomorrow? We'll be talking about that with a former Grand National winner. Stay with us. Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Morning, here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. A bit of a north-south split as we go through today and into the weekend. Some dry, fine weather towards the south, wetter further north. This morning there are heavy outbreaks of rain pushing across parts of Northern Ireland into northern England and across the bulk of Scotland, though northeastern parts clinging on to some sunshine into the afternoon. Do watch out for some strong gusty winds in the northwest. Across the bulk of England and Wales, lots of fine and at times sunny weather into this afternoon, and temperatures rising to highs of around 20, 21, possibly even 22 Celsius towards the southeast. Everywhere, temperatures will be well above average for the time of year. Sticking with the north-south split as we go through the end of the day and into tomorrow, further rain across northern parts, particularly across the borders area, likely to see some heavy bursts for a time and showers feeding in from the northwest. Staying drier towards the south, and there will be some clear skies, but quite a bit of cloud, and we have mild air across us, so temperatures not dropping a huge amount for most places. Through Saturday itself then, a bit of cloud bringing some drizzly rain across northern and western parts of England and Wales perhaps. Towards the southeast though, lots of fine and at times sunny weather again. The more unsettled picture will be once more across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here some hefty showery rain pushing its way through, and temperatures for many will be down a touch compared to today. As we go into Sunday, and we're going to see further showers which could be heavy at times across northern areas, drier towards the south, but temperatures dropping compared to recently.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
10:48, you're with Ben and Pip on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Now, it's my favourite time of the year when it comes to sport. It's the Grand National, the greatest show on turf, as they say, and it gets underway tomorrow.
People will be watching from all over the world, millions of them. And in a bid to avoid a repeat of last year, police say they have stepped up security to protect the race from protesters.
Joining us now, I'm delighted to say, is former Grand National winning jockey Barry Geraghty. Good morning, Barry. Very pleased to be speaking with you. I think I first saw you spinning around Fontwell back in the day when I was a younger lad. What can we expect tomorrow, Barry, in terms of, A, the race, the sporting spectacle, and also is there growing concern about protesters, animal rights, people getting involved again?
Morning, Ben. Morning, Pip. Yeah, well, I suppose there's lots to look forward to. The race itself is an amazing race. And, you know, as you said, there's millions of viewers worldwide who tune in to watch it. It's a really well celebrated. There obviously was issues last year with protesters, but The feel is that I'm not sure if there is a threat, as strong a threat of a protest this year. There has been good changes made to the Grand National. There was good changes made 10 years ago when they changed the core of the fence from a wooden one to a plastic one, which was safer for horses, more forgiving, if you like. But this year they've reduced the numbers. With those changes that were made, that increased the speed of the race in the early part. So they've reduced the numbers from 40 to 34. And by doing that, they're hoping just to create more space for the runners and riders. So they're constantly making changes in Aintree to make the race as safe as possible. These are horses we all love and enjoy and celebrate. So it's important that the race is as safe as possible, but it's important also to keep that it is such a unique race. It is a different challenge. It's 4.5 mile, or 4 miles, should I say. It takes a lot of getting. They're different fences. They're not as challenging as they were before, but they're different, and horses maybe find them a little bit strange. But it brings maybe some old quirky characters back to life. So it's a unique test.
Barry, it's 21 years, isn't it, since you won the Grand National? I don't know whether it seems like 21 years, but I'm sure you remember that 4+ mile course very well. Can you just talk us through the emotions, the fear, what you remember from it? You know, what's it like jumping the chair, the infamous Beecher's Brook?
Oh, well, that was a magical day. And, you know, you dream of winning the Grand National, and you dream of hard-fought victories and, you know, surviving the test that it is. But on Monty's Pass 21 years ago, he went around there. He never touched a twig. He jumped brilliantly. He travelled really well and won at his ease. So I never expected, I dreamt of winning the Grand National, but I never expected to win it as easy as he did. And the moment for me in the race was when we jumped the third last fence, when there's no amplification, there's no crowds, there's no sound. Complete silence, and I'm traveling so easy. I've one horse in front of me. I'm on the verge of winning the biggest race in the world, and I could hear a pin drop. All I had to do then was just sit and wait and be patient, and the horse did the rest. So it was an amazing feeling. But it's a massive thrill going around there amongst the fields, jumping those iconic fences. It's what you grow up dreaming of doing. And Beecher's Brook, as you mentioned, and the chair. The canal turn, like these are iconic fences, and it's a thrill to even just to compete and complete.
What would you say to those people, Barry, though, who are disgusted every year by the horses that do die, who say that, you know, yes, it's famous, it's also infamous, and it is cruel to them?
Yeah, it's a race. You know, you will have fatalities. That's natural with animals. You know, where the horses are in the field. Bob's
Is that okay, though? Is it okay to say, well, you will have fatalities, almost like it's an acceptance? Because we wouldn't say that about human.
Well, you do when you talk about the roads. 5 people a day die on the roads in Britain. Do we ban driving? I don't think we could do that. So racing is a sport. It's an industry. These horses are bred to race. These horses are cared for. They're minded. Everyone involved loves and adores these horses. And it's really unfortunate when there is fatalities. We don't want that. We celebrate the race as the brilliant challenge it is. And we are, you know, it affects everyone very negatively when there is fatalities. We don't want it, but it is part of life with horses and animals. That's what happens. So you have to accept to a small degree. But we do our best, and the changes that have been made for the right reason. So it's you know, Aintree do a brilliant job, and everyone, trainers, owners, jockeys, do their best for their horses too.
Yeah, and Barry, as you alluded to earlier in the chat, the size of the fences have been reduced. They've changed the material. I think this year the number of horses running has been reduced. So there are efforts being made to make it safer. But I do wonder, year on year, whether that kind of dilutes the integrity and the spectacle of the race. I mean, are you in favour of those changes?
No, the changes are right. We want to make this race as safe as possible. We want to keep this race. You know, it is part of the heritage of this country, but it's an iconic race known and watched worldwide. So it's important to keep it and keep it. It is unique. It doesn't present the same challenge as it did when I first rode it in 2000, and there's no doubt about that. But it is unique. It is different. It sparks an old horse back to life. Old horses who've lost interest, maybe, you know, gone a little bit lethargic, they come to Aintree, and just the buzz and the energy and the different fences. So it can rekindle an old flame, if you like. So it's a magical race, and it's one that we love, and it's very, very important to racing.
Right, come on then, Barry. Let's get down to business. Who do people need to look out for?
Yeah, well, Meeting of the Waters is the horse I really like. He was a good winner in Ireland at Christmas. He loves the ground. He was third at the Cheltenham Festival and the Ultima. I think he would improve for that run. So I think he's a horse. He's in 10 stone 8 as well, which is important. A lightweight on soft ground. jumps really well, but there's lots and lots of horses with chances. I think Mahler Mission has a good chance, and a couple of outsiders maybe. Late Night Pass, ridden by female jockey Jean Andrews, who's got a good record, both horse and rider, around this course. They won the Fox Hunters here a couple of years ago. And Foxy Jacks, another one, outsider. He's a quirky character. I think he'd like these fences.
Great stuff. Thanks, Barry. Your expertise is much appreciated, and you've had a sterling career. Congratulations. I remember you winning me a couple of quid on Finian's Rainbow at the festival a few years back, so good on you. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day tomorrow.
Cheers, Ben. Thanks, Pep.
So with us here on Britain's Newsroom, we'll be bringing you more on that breaking news that Greater Manchester Police are formally investigating the Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, over the sale of her council house. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News. The weather, it's not bad at the moment, is it?
Just about.
Not quite bikini weather, but almost. Here's Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. It's going to be a bit of a wet picture across northern parts today, but drier, brighter and warmer further south because we have high pressure dominating here. Further north, though, we have low pressure pushing its way in, and frontal systems bring the focus for some outbreaks of rain that are sweeping in across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England and into Scotland, though the far northeast of Scotland clinging on to some sunshine into the afternoon. Do watch out for some strong gusty winds, particularly in the northwest. Across central southern parts of England and Wales, a lot of bright, fine weather to be had. Although the sunshine may be quite hazy, it's pretty strong now, and so we're likely to see temperatures rising to highs of around 21, possibly 22 Celsius. Sticking with the north-south split as we go through the night, so further outbreaks of rain across northern parts could be quite heavy at times. Drier towards the south, could be some murkiness developing around south coastal parts around the English Channel, but also some clear skies developing at times. Despite the clear skies, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, most places holding up in double figures or high single digits. As we go through Saturday then, a relatively mild start for many of us. Any mist and murk towards the south coast should clear away through the morning. There will be some outbreaks of rain across northern and western parts of England and Wales, but staying dry towards the southeast until the evening. Further north though, an unsettled picture across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some further outbreaks of heavy rain, which could be gusty at times too. Temperatures not quite as high as today. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
A very good morning to you. It's 11 a.m. on Friday, the 12th of April. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Ben Leo, and Pip Thompson.
Breaking news, Greater Manchester Police reopens a probe into claims that Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner may have broken electoral law over information she gave about her living situation a decade ago. We'll bring you the latest.
And do we do enough for our veterans? Rishi Sunak's launching an employment plan today to help get them into high-paid jobs after they leave the forces.
£2 million for Sunak's Operation Prosper. But Labour say that the government is not doing enough to support the veterans community.
Keeping Britain safe, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer pledges the UK's nuclear deterrent is the bedrock of his plans to protect the country.
And reaction to the death of former NFL and Hollywood star O.J. Simpson in America. He was acquitted, remember, of 2 murders, but later found liable for their deaths in a civil lawsuit.
WhatsApp age change. Social media giant Meta is under fire for lowering the minimum age for WhatsApp from 16 to 13. How responsible or irresponsible do you think that is?
Let us know what you think about all those stories. gbnews.com/your say. Lots of comments so far, not least about that WhatsApp story. Is Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, the parent company of WhatsApp, Facebook, are they right to reduce the age from 16 to 13 for kids to use the app? I don't think so, personally.
I mean, it's very different from normal messaging, isn't it? The fact that it's end-to-end encrypted. We hear so much about bullying of school children.
Well, there's reports that young kids are getting added against their will into big groups where they're sharing sexual content, racist messages. And as a parent, I worry about my kids one day growing up and being subject to that kind of thing. So let us know. We've changed it. gbnews.com.
we still got to remember gbnews.com.
We'll get there.
/ you'll say.
We better get to the news. Here's Sam.
Pip and Ben, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just after 11 o'clock and we start with that breaking news, a recap of the news coming out of Manchester this morning, that police have now launched a formal investigation into the Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner over the sale of her council house. The new investigation comes after Conservative MP James Daly reported the Labour MP to Greater Manchester Police. It's understood he made them aware of claims by neighbours that contradicted Ms Rayner's statement that a property separate from her husband's home was in fact her main residency. She's also been accused of avoiding capital gains tax on that property. Angela Rayner, though, does deny any wrongdoing. The former managing director of the Post Office has today admitted he was unaware that the organisation was itself prosecuting sub-postmasters in about 2/3 of cases. Speaking at the Horizon inquiry, he said there would have been a higher bar if an outside body brought the cases. More than 900 sub-postmasters were wrongly prosecuted due to a faulty IT system between 1999 and 2015. Alan Cook has apologised for his involvement in the scandal, and he's previously said he didn't know about the software problems until shortly before he left his role. In other news, Sir Keir Starmer says Britain's nuclear deterrent is the bedrock of Labour's plan to keep the country safe. The Labour leader is visiting Barrow-in-Furness today, where nuclear submarines are being built. He's expected to reaffirm his party's commitment to defence spending, with a pledge to boost investment and to strengthen Britain's security and economic growth if Labour wins the next election. The government, though, has dismissed today's visit as a distraction. But Shadow Defence Minister Luke Pollard says bolstering the nation's defences is an economic opportunity.
When economic conditions allow, we hope to get to 2.5% of GDP on defence, making sure that we can support those men and women in our armed forces, have the equipment and the capabilities that they need to deter aggression, but if necessary, defeat an opponent in war. And that is what Keir is setting out today.
Britain is turning an economic corner, that's according to the Chancellor, after the nation's output grew by 0.1% in February. The Office for National Statistics also revised January's figure, pushing it up to 0.3%. The latest figures suggest Britain is coming out of recession with significant improvements across manufacturing, particularly in the car sector. The Defence Secretary says a new British military laser could be on Ukraine's front line by 2027 to help take down Russian drones. Grant Shapps claims the weapon will have huge ramifications for the conflict. The so-called Dragonfire is capable of cutting through its targets with an intense beam of light. It comes after the age of conscription in Ukraine was lowered last week by 2 years to now 25 in an effort to help replenish troops. Lord Cameron has warned Iran against drawing the Middle East into a wider conflict. The Foreign Secretary spoke to his Iranian counterpart following threats made by Tehran against Israel. It comes as concerns are raised that an Israeli airstrike that killed 2 Iranian generals last week could provoke a retaliation. Meanwhile, the US has told its officials and their families in Israel not to travel outside of 3 areas. Access to funding for farmers hit by bad weather is to be widened amid fears that the effects of climate change are creating a crisis for British agriculture. Grants of up to £25,000 were initially only available to those within 150 metres of a main river that had flooded. The National Farmers Union has welcomed the broader access to the funds, but says the impact of poor weather on British farms goes far beyond the recent storm Henk. A group of MPs is calling for a strategy to help combat misinformation aimed at young people on the social platform TikTok. Ofcom data suggests that 1 in 10 children aged 12 to 15 use that platform as their main source of news, despite concerns over the Chinese government's influence on the app. The recommendation is part of a wider report emphasising the need for more trusted voices like scientists and doctors to help combat conspiracy theories. TikTok says it does welcome the idea. And social media giant Meta is under fire for lowering the minimum age on its WhatsApp platform from 16 to 13. Campaigners say the move is tone-deaf and irresponsible. However, Meta say the change brings the app's age limit in line with most countries and that protections are in place. Well, it comes as the tech firm, which also owns Facebook and Instagram, unveiled a range of new safety features, including an automatic blurring feature on intimate images. That filter will be on by default on accounts for those aged under 18. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. More in the next half hour. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan that code there on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
11:07, you're with Ben and Pip on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. So, just by the way, I think Sam from the news headlines just there said that in the menu, I said it was gbnews.com/my-say. It's actually your say. So, don't listen to me. I'm being a bit of a fool this morning. gbnews.com/your say.
Thank you for having your say today. In the last few minutes, we spoke to the Grand National winner from 2003, Barry Geraghty. Of course, that massive racing festival is on at the moment. The big race tomorrow. Lots of your thoughts coming in. Kev says, how many other sports are there where animals are killed in this way? But then we had somebody saying, Sick of the protesters at the Grand National. I love all sports and there are risks to every single sport. That's from Debbie.
Yeah, Lynn says, have you noticed how when a horse loses his or her mounts, they still run along with all the other horses and jump over fences, even without the jockey? Surely this is an indication that they enjoy it. I mean, they are herd animals. I'm a big advocate for racing. I love racing. But, I mean, some people would say they are herd animals and it's just their instinct to run along.
Andrew says, what will happen to the horses if horse racing is stopped? Will they be sent to France to use as steaks in restaurants? Horses prefer racing. Yeah, but what would happen is they wouldn't get bred.
Exactly. They're bred for racing. They love racing. They love jumping. They're more likely to break their leg in their paddock jumping a fence, as my favourite horse ever, Corto Star. Some of you might remember him. He died that way. He was having a laugh in his paddock, running around the field, and he broke his leg. Also, just by the way, before we move on, the Grand National is a great British institution. It is historic, it's iconic, it's watched around the world by tens of millions. It's great for the economy up in Liverpool and Aintree. And I just feel that, you know, as we get with the royal family and other great British traditions, there seems to be some sort of agenda where we're just eroding away at everything that's great and memorable about this country.
Well, no, because there's another side to this. It might be historic, it might be iconic, but it doesn't mean that it's not without its risks or even cruelty, as some people think.
As Barry Garrity
the
said...
fences, I think, have been lowered. It seems to be going in the right direction when it comes to safety, but you still have had three horses dead last year. Yeah. And if any horse is at risk of dying, several horses, is that right?
No, but they, as I just said, they could die equally, a higher chance, or in their own field or their paddock. These horses are thoroughbreds. They love jumping.
There are deaths, so it makes you question how fair it is to the horses. It would just be great to have 1 year when no horse died.
I think there was a couple of years back. There were deaths in the actual festival, so there's racing going on at Aintree today, but in the Grand National itself, I think there was 1 year. But look, I agree, we love animals, you love animals, the people involved in racing love animals. No one wants to see horses die, and that's why they have made efforts in recent years to reduce the size of the fences, change the materials in the fences to make it easier on horses, and of course this year, fewer runners as well. So we'll see. Fingers crossed for tomorrow.
OK, we can disagree agreeably.
Of course we can. That's what it's about.
Can't we, Ben? Right, breaking news. This has come in the last half hour because police are formally investigating Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner over the sale of her council house. Concerns that she may have committed an offence by giving false information about where she was living.
OK, let's bring in our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. She's in Westminster with the latest. Morning, Olivia. What's going on then, please, with regards to this new police investigation?
Well, just a couple of hours ago, Pip and I were saying that this scandal hadn't really cut through. I think it is going to cut through now. Greater Manchester Police are investigating Angela Rayner over these claims that she lied about her living situation to avoid paying capital gains tax. Originally, the police said that it was not going to look into claims, but James Daly, the Conservative MP who reported Angela Rayner to the police in the first place, has gone back to the police and said that neighbours contradict Angela Rayner's account that this address in Vicarage Road in Stockport was her main living address. Neighbours have apparently said that actually it was her brother who was living there at the time. And according to electoral law, if you are not living at a property, if you haven't been living there for quite a long time, then you are eligible to pay capital gains tax on the profits that you made from the sale of that property. So if Angela Rayner is found to have been lying about living there at the time, and as we know, there is evidence that perhaps she wasn't living there at the time, that her children's birth certificates were registered from her husband's address and she was married to her husband at the time. If it does turn out that she lied about this and that her brother was actually living there rather than her, she could be found to have broken electoral law. Even if she hasn't found to have broken electoral law, then this is a very difficult situation for the Labour Party. When Boris Johnson was being investigated by the police for the Partygate claims, Angela Rayner said that it was a disgrace that he was staying on by the Prime Minister while he was being investigated by the police. I expect we'll hear lots of Tory MPs repeat that back at her over the coming hours and days.
We just better mention the Greater Manchester Police statement saying that they are investigating whether any offences have been committed following that reassessment of the information provided to us by Mr Daly.
OK, elsewhere today, Rishi Sunak, he's pledged £2.1 million to help veterans into high-paid jobs after they leave the armed forces. That's under a scheme called Operation Prosper.
While the veteran employment rate is 89%, thousands of veterans are still thought to have slipped through the cracks after leaving the forces.
Joining us now is James Sunderland, Tory MP for Bracknell and former Army Colonel. Good morning to you. Is this enough for our needy veterans? £2.1 million, some would say, doesn't really touch the sides, James.
Well, it's never enough, but it's the latest in a series of government plans to help veterans. We could talk about Up Courage, which is about mental health. We could talk about Up Fortitude, which is about getting veterans off the streets. And now Up Prosper, which I think is the right thing to do. Anything that we can do as a government to increase the employability of veterans and to get them into the right jobs is a good thing for me.
This Armed Forces Covenant that was introduced in 2000, it was a promise that we acknowledge and understand that veterans should be treated with fairness and respect when it comes to, you know, society, communities. Are they being treated with fairness and respect? I mean, we hear that homelessness in England amongst veterans has increased by some 14%.
I was privileged to chair the Armed Forces Bill Select Committee, which effectively brought the Armed Forces Covenant into law. So I was immersed in that particular bit of work, and it's a great bit of work. We can thank Johnny Mercer and many other Conservatives over the last 14 years for increasing the offer for our veterans. As a veteran myself and as the chair of the Veterans All Party Group, I've got a particular interest in this. And I can tell you that the lot that our veterans are facing is improving all of the time. We've also succeeded before Christmas in getting most of our veterans off the streets in terms of homelessness under Up Fortitude. So the offer is continuing to improve, and I'm very supportive of that.
When you left the military then, James, what sort of support were you offered?
It's a fascinating question because I left the military at very short notice. When I became the candidate in Bracknell for the Conservative Party, I was still serving as a regular army officer, and I applied for something called a premature voluntary release, where I was literally discharged from the army in 6 days. And I can thank the armed forces for that, because I asked to leave at very short notice. They let me go. So I have nothing but admiration for them, for the support they gave me, both during my career and also since.
But what support was that?
But there's a huge amount of support available. There's a resettlement package, which is about 2 years in duration. Every single eligible veteran goes through that package. It's a combination of resettlement training, interviews, workshops. It's about honing CVs, work experience, and of course termination leave that allows veterans to seek the employment they need. So I'm pretty comfortable as a veteran myself that the offer for our veterans is very good.
James, why don't we treat veterans in this country as they do in the United States? They are decorated, they're applauded in public, they have veteran ID cards. We don't even have that in this country, do we?
Well, the veterans ID cards are coming out. They're being rolled out all of the time. I've got mine. It's a great thing to have in one's pocket if you need to get it out. I benefit from the Veterans Rail Card, which is a fantastic bit of work introduced by Johnny Mercer, and the offer is improving all of the time. And of course, we can look at the Americans, our compatriots and our colleagues out there to see where the bar's been set. So there's work to do, in my view, to increase that offer, but we are well on that way. And we value our veterans, we value military service, we value the service of all key workers. And I'm pretty comfortable that while there is more to do, we've come a hell of a long way in the last 14 years.
OK, you say come a hell of a long way, but Labour's Steve McCabe, for example, who's spoken a lot on this issue, he says it's the Conservatives that have halved employment support for veterans and have failed armed forces communities for the last 14 years.
Well, to be blunt, he's talking absolute nonsense. It was the Conservative government that introduced the Armed Forces Covenant into law. I chaired that bill committee. Op Prosper is the latest in a series of excellent initiatives to support our veterans. Richard Branson very famously said, train your people so well that they can leave, but treat them so well they don't want to. That's exactly where the armed forces need to be, both in terms of treating their service personnel as well as they can, but also ensuring that they are as well suited for employment outside after their service. That is absolutely what Operation Prosper is there to do. And as a Conservative MP, I wouldn't be sat here now extolling the virtues of veterans and military service and the offer for our veterans if I didn't believe it.
OK, James Sunderland, Tory MP for Bracknell and, of course, former Army Colonel. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
OK, up next, the RSPCA. They're under fire for releasing a bizarre rebrand video that compares cattle farming to stepping on a snail. We're going to be discussing that next and show you the clip. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stay with us.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
This new hate crime bill on women's issues, you think this is the least funny April Fool's joke in history?
Yeah, although the Scottish Government and the Scottish Police do seem to be trying to make a bit of a joke of it when, you know, their campaign Hate Hurts is fronted by a hate monster who's a sort of cuddly, bright red Muppet-style thing. And some of the things that Humza Yousaf said about it were from a soft play centre over the weekend. But yeah, it's really not a joke. It's not actually clever lawyers who know the wording of the law who enforce the law. It's the police. And the police have basically not been trained on this at all. There's a 2-hour online training course they're meant to have done, and lots of them haven't already done it. And we know from the way that the police have been talking about it that they're wildly overstretching what it might actually be to be, in particular, abusive, which is one of the words in the new law, and specifically on the issue of transgender identity. To claim that just noticing the fact that there are two sexes and that sex can't change is meant to be hateful, that, you know, even after years of trying to study it, I can't understand why people hold this belief. But it's part and parcel of a pattern of legal measures that the Scottish Government has either introduced or has sought to introduce. So it tried to introduce gender self-ID, but that was overruled by Westminster because it was out of the power of the devolved government. It's still attempting to bring in a conversion therapy law, which sounds nice but isn't nice. It actually criminalises proper ethical treatment of gender-confused youngsters. They're trying to say that men who have certificates saying that they're women count as women for a particular measure to do with public boards. And then this hate crime law, which tries to make it really difficult for someone to talk in a factual, reality-based, clear, understandable way about all these measures. It all adds up to a sort of an authoritarian attempt to deny the fact that human beings are mammals and come in two sexes, and that recognising that matters for women's rights especially.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. Now, we brought you that breaking news about police investigating claims that Angela Rayner, Labour's deputy leader, may have broken electoral law over information she gave about her living situation a decade ago. The Labour Party is saying it remains confident that she has complied with the rules and that she welcomes the chance to set out the facts with the police. So that is the latest we are hearing on that.
Interesting. And, of course, Sir Keir Starmer yesterday said he had full confidence in Angela Rayner, so we'll see how that develops. We're joined now by political commentator Emma Webb and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner in the studio. Welcome back, ladies. So the RSPCA, they're under fire for this advert. Take a look.
What you need, no, I got it. All I'm asking.
OK, so that's the new RSPCA advert promoting animal welfare, of course. They've got a statement on this. They've said dairy cows face a number of welfare challenges, from painful lameness to uncomfortable bedding and having no access to pasture. We want to encourage people to understand more about where food comes from and how the animals are reared. So, Amy, thoughts on that? I mean, do we need to be more aware of where our food comes from and, of course, the living conditions that animals are dealing with or suffering from?
Yeah, because I think the farmer's reaction is that they're comparing farming to stepping on a snail or killing a bee, but it's not really that. It's just saying in any scenario, animals can be victims of cruelty. And I think it's always good to have a reminder of the realities of farming, because when you go into the supermarket and you buy your eggs, you buy your milk, you buy your meat, you can sometimes have a bit of detachment.
Well,
so I think
there's people all the time who say they can buy it off the supermarket shelf, but they wouldn't want to see the animal being killed.
Yeah.
Now, is it not a legitimate view to go, well, hang on a minute, if you're not prepared to kill it yourself, why eat it?
Hypocrites, Emma?
Yeah, if you're eating meat but you wouldn't be prepared to kill and prepare the animal, then sure, you are a hypocrite, for sure. I think this is a great story for Amy and I, because both of us are animal lovers. And I do think, obviously, it's important that people are aware of where their food comes from and so on. But farmers at the moment are really under fire in all sorts of different ways, particularly with net zero policies. And I think the juxtaposition in this advert of animals that are just simply being farmed, and that being juxtaposed with a starving dog or a hedgehog being hit by a car. The advert itself, I think, is just a bit sort of lame in a way with the strange singing, but
it's quite effective though. It does make you stop and think, because how many times do we accidentally, I know I do at night, accidentally step on a snail?
Now, I was saying to Amy off air, I actually do pick up snails and remove them if I think that they're going to be in someone's way.
I do it.
But I've stepped on snails as well, of course. But I think that, and we've seen this also with other animal rights organisations and animal rights charities, we do also have to, yes, of course, animals should have some kind of protection in law, and I do think that animals should be protected because, like I say, I'm a real animal lover.
Yeah.
But also, animals, including farm animals, they are animals. They're not human beings. They are farmed for food.
They still feel pain.
They do, of course, and animals should be treated properly and with respect. But I just think that sometimes, particularly with organisations like PETA, they go way, way over the top, even trying to do things like policing people's language, saying you shouldn't call yourself a dog's owner. Because that alludes to the dog as if they're some kind of slave,
Just jokers. I mean, I've had my own criticism of the RSPCA in recent years for different things, but actually, I agree with you. We're all animal lovers. We eat meat, and if we can improve and raise awareness of animal welfare, why not? I don't see the problem with this story, Amy.
No, exactly. But I think a lot of people, they do detach, particularly with dairy. The fact that a cow is bred and then kept pregnant and kept milking its whole life and then it just dies.
Well,
I don't see how that can ever...
treating the animal with respect?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. How can that ever be treating the animal with respect? Which I think this advert really made me a bit divided on my own habits, because, how can you ever say, oh, well, we're all going to be kind to animals and then justify using them for our own end?
I do want to add to that farmers get a really, really bad rap and are constantly under attack at the moment, like I said, particularly with net zero policies. And if anybody loves animals and knows more about than any city dweller or person who lives in an urban area about animals, it's farmers. They love their animals, they care about their animals, and they know far more about what counts for animal welfare. And of course we have had problems with battery farming, slaughter techniques, things like that. And of course animals should be protected and they shouldn't be, arbitrarily harmed or hurt, and they do feel pain. But at the same time, it's just simply not right to try and portray just normal farming and animal farming as if there is something sort of like inherently cruel, because I think...
But I guess there is.
There are on some farms. I mean,
Of course,
investigations have been done. I mean, you obviously can't say that about every farmer.
Of course, but
some
they
of
could
their
do
practices are
an
questionable.
advert showing farmers taking care of their animals properly if they want.
But then they ultimately they're bred to slaughter, which I guess ultimately is at odds with
what domesticated farm animals are bred for.
Well, exactly. But I think that's why that advert is good, because maybe not everyone is actually comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And it can't be, in the end, a kind way to treat animals to use them for our own ends. I mean, that's quite extreme.
Should we park that for the time being? WhatsApp, the parent company Meta, Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, they have reduced the minimum age to access WhatsApp in the UK from 16 to 13. They say it's in line with the rest of the world. Is this a good thing, Amy?
Well, I didn't even know it had an age limit, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I get texts and WhatsApps from my little nephew who's 12. I didn't realise. But the online safety bill obviously vowed to make UK online a safer place. So this brings it in line with TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat. So I can't really see all the hysteria because a 13-year-old can go on all the other platforms, but just not WhatsApp.
I mean, some adults shouldn't be accessing these apps, let alone young kids.
But I think it's the encrypted messages on WhatsApp. And one of the suggestions of the online safety bill was to remove the private chat encryption for certain ages. So maybe that's a way of making WhatsApp safe for kids. And also they're introducing, hopefully, they're in development of this nudity filter. So if something comes through to a child's phone and it can detect if it's an inappropriate image, which might have been handy for William
Let me tell you something,
it?
Emma, you might agree with this. Any time the government says to you, we are going to take away some of your rights, some of your privacy for the greater good because it's to benefit you, that is always a massive red flag.
Don't unencrypt the app and violate adults' privacy.
No, not for everyone.
So it's just so that children can use the app. Don't let children use the app. I have quite a strong view on this, and I just simply think that smartphones, and never mind this being in line with other apps, I don't think any young person should be on any of these social media sites. There is increasing evidence that shows that this is extremely bad for young people's mental health, particularly when they're at a younger age and they're basically being inducted into socialisation through this infinite space where they're being effectively taught to socialise by strangers, by other adults out there. It's like having a window into your daughter's bedroom.
But it's such a breeding ground for online bullying, and bullying just person to person at school can be horrific. But with WhatsApp, you can be added to a group, you can be bullied, feel completely isolated, and then they kick you out of the group.
Everybody needs to be in this together because it's not going to work if it's just one parent stops their child from doing it, because you need all of the parents to do it so that it eliminates the overall pressure to be involved in these sorts of things. So you need to ban smartphones in secondary schools and primary schools, and it's simply not an argument that it's for communication, because you can give the child a dumb phone. They do not need to be on these social media apps. It's bad for them.
Okay.
It's like giving them crack cocaine.
Yeah. All right, Amy, Emma, thanks very much. Sam Francis has all your latest news headlines. Sam.
Good morning from the newsroom. Just coming up to 32 minutes past 11, and leading the news this morning, the Labour Party now says it is confident that Angela Rayner has complied with the rules after Greater Manchester Police have launched an investigation over her tax affairs. It relates to information she gave about her living situation over a decade ago. The new probe comes after Conservative MP James Daly reported the Labour MP to Greater Manchester Police. Asked if it was politically motivated, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says the investigation will reveal the facts.
I think the double standards have been extraordinary. Angela Rayner herself has spent her political career calling people out for exactly the thing that she seems to be doing now. It's not acceptable to ignore it, and it's not acceptable for Keir Starmer to say he won't even read reports into it. This is something which is a serious matter. It's important that it's looked into properly, and I welcome the idea that the police are doing that.
The former managing director of the Post Office has admitted today that he didn't realise his organisation was making the decision to take people accused of fraud to court. Speaking at the Horizon inquiry, Alan Cook said there would have been a higher bar if an outside body had brought the cases. More than 900 sub-postmasters were wrongly prosecuted due to a faulty IT system between 1999 and 2015. A man's due in court later after being charged with the murder of a mother who was killed while pushing her child in a pram. 27-year-old Kalsuma Aktka was attacked in Bradford on Saturday afternoon and later died in hospital. Her baby, though, wasn't harmed. Habibur Massam, who's 25 and from Burnley, appeared before magistrates yesterday and is due at Crown Court later. And the Defence Secretary says a new British military laser could be on Ukraine's front line by 2027 to help take down Russian drones. Grant Shapps claims the weapon will have huge ramifications for the conflict. The so-called Dragonfire is capable of cutting through its targets with an intense beam of light. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. Plenty more to come with Pip and Ben. In the meantime, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2493 and €1.1722. The price of gold is currently £1,919.36 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,015 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up at noon. Good afternoon, Britain, with Tom and Emily, who join us now. Hello.
Hello. And what a news day it's turned into. This developing story on Angela Rayner. Huge questions now of potential hypocrisy. We heard from Grant Shapps just a moment ago saying that Angela Rayner is someone who's called on people to resign over many different things in the past. And perhaps most interestingly, when Boris Johnson was placed under police investigation, no question of whether he was guilty or otherwise, but just the very fact of investigation, Angela Rayner said that he should resign over that. Now, why is it one rule for him and one rule for her?
For some crusty M&S sandwiches in Downing Street that he wasn't even aware were there.
It's a very tricky one, isn't it, for Keir Starmer? So far, he is standing very much beside her. They're denying all wrongdoing. She's denying all wrongdoing, of course. But the team have seen the tax advice, so why not be transparent about it?
So that's right, is it? Starmer and Labour have seen the advice given to
His team, which is the interesting thing, because there's always been this sort of safety gap, this air gap between Starmer and his team. He said, I don't need to see this tax advice because my team has seen it. Well, that's a get-out-of-jail-free card for Keir Starmer. Of course, we're not going to prejudge the police investigation at all. Angela Rayner has maintained her innocence throughout this, and it could very well be that she's found to be innocent by the police. But if she isn't, that puts Starmer in a difficult position.
Keir Starmer wants us to be talking about his full-throated defence of our nuclear deterrent, of course. That's what he wants us to be talking about
today.
A little bit of a distraction, We're also going to be talking about support for veterans. We're also going to be talking about one shopping centre in Kent where the cleaners are being handed stab vests to go about their daily job. Why on earth is a shopping centre in Kent having to give out stab vests?
The Garden of England, ladies and gentlemen.
Maybe they're struggling to recruit cleaners, are they?
Well, I think
they feel so unsafe they can't get cleaners.
Isn't that just crazy?
It is a situation whereby these are the people that are left last in the building when there are the fewest people around. But it does show a kind of shocking state of the
Which shopping centre?
We'll reveal all.
OK.
It's
all
in
right,
Kent,
on that bombshell. Emily, Tom, thank you very much. They're on from 12.
12 to 3.
23 minutes, right. Stay with us on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Plenty more to come. We'll catch you after this break.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
There is a kind of a Mediterranean side to that as well, because my mother came from that side, you know, a big family. And I think there is that sense of community where family is kind of key. And I think that's really kind of what we sort of try and continue, really. I mean, certainly with children and stuff like that, you know, Sunday lunches were always, you know, the big thing.
Yeah, but if you go down the Old Kent Road today...
Very different. Very different, yeah. And that was quite some time ago as well, because we were very close to where the Thomas a Becket was.
Yeah, I know, the boxing upstairs and all the rest of it. Yep.
And I did go down there not so long ago, actually, and it really is very, very different. I mean, I'm not saying that's necessarily bad. I think we have a different view of things.
Most people in London, Nicky, don't even know the names of the next-door neighbours.
No, true.
We've completely lost that sense of community that you grew up with, that you knew. I think it's a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say sometimes I'm a bit guilty of it where I am now as well. You live in big houses, and I do see my neighbours, but, you know, it's not quite the same as it was back.
Now, I guess from that background, you're a teenager, you want to become a hairdresser.
Yeah,
that must have been quite a difficult call.
Yeah, that one was a really good call. My dad went, "Oh God, what?" I mean, it was just very funny, and certainly from the point of view of, you know, this was the early 70s, so it wasn't really the choice of most people would do.
No, but you did. Why?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I went to a grammar school, and I didn't do as well in the final exams, and I was kind of forced into sort of leaving, and you suddenly go, ooh, no idea what to do here, really.
Yeah.
But the idea of doing something in fashion, and, you know, I really kind of... I know that I was given some really good advice, actually, by somebody that said, just start at the bottom. Don't necessarily go to, you know, college or whatever. Not, there may not be anything wrong with those, but just start at the bottom, go to the best place you can and start sweeping the floor.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10:40. Ben and Pip with you on Britain. 11:40. Oh, goodness me.
Do you want this to be a 3-hour show?
No. I'd like a coffee, though. I need to wake up. Shall we get stuck into some emails? Warren says on gbnews.com/your say, good morning, Warren. Children under 16 shouldn't have a smartphone. Their parents want them to be safe, then buy them a basic phone to call, what we call a brick, one of those old Nokia 3210s or something.
Honest to God, you'd think they were surgically attached to kids' arms. You know, they come to the dinner table.
And adults.
And it's like, what huge news are you expecting to see on your phone that you cannot have a conversation with us for an hour at dinner?
Lisa says, I absolutely disagree with the WhatsApp age being reduced. Child exploitation's on the rise and police are unable to protect any child using WhatsApp from potential harm due to it being encrypted.
Raj, good morning. Social media exposure at a very young age is like having your kids raised by total strangers. That's a really interesting way of putting it.
And on horse racing, the Grand National, of course, tomorrow. We heard from former winner Barry Geraghty a little bit earlier. Dave says, why is everyone worried about the horses? Jockeys can die by being trampled. All sports are risky.
Yeah, but when has a jockey died at the Grand National? Did a jockey die last year at the Grand National?
No.
Did a jockey die the year before at the Grand National?
No. Jockeys have, of course, died in racing and they've been severely paralysed and disabled as well.
But more horses die.
Yeah, the argument is, of course, the horses don't have a choice to race. I disagree with that, but that's the argument.
OK, that debate is going to run through all the way through tomorrow and after the Grand National as well. Let's hope they do come home safe. Now, it's been just over 6 months since the government's controversial barge, the Bibby Stockholm, first opened its doors to asylum seekers.
Since then, tensions amongst locals have been running high. One of the main sources of frustration amongst Portlanders in Dorset is a luxury-free bus service that ferries asylum seekers around the town, all while locals are left out in the cold and forced to sort of pay their own bus fares for the public buses.
What's luxury about the bus?
I guess they're coaches. They're maybe tinted windows. I think they're just a bit nicer than traditional buses.
Well, our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, has been investigating. He returned to Portland and has this report.
When the bus comes in Portland, not everyone can get on it.
If they travel on the bus with the local community, there could be some sort of integration, because a lot of people are confused of why they're here, and maybe a little chat on the bus, because that's where people do talk. Because I meet people on the bus every day and you ended up chatting. Wouldn't this be a great way to integrate? But no, they're separated. And how can the local community move forward if they're always kept in isolation from us?
For some, there are echoes of segregation, and it's leading to resentment. Resentment at the special buses, resentment at the healthcare the Bibby residents receive, resentment at the wet weather gear for hiking that Dorset Council provides. 6 months on from the arrival of the first residents on the Bibby Stockholm, the feeling in the local community is just as strong, just as divided and just as passionate as it always has been. And while a community that didn't ask for this argues and accuses, the sheer cost of the Bibby Stockholm sticks in their throat. £34.8 million.
If you break that down into figures, that works out at capacity at about £4,500 per month per head. And I mean, if you do a little bit of investigation, you can rent a really plush house in Sandbanks for that money, or an apartment in Chelsea each. Or, you know, you may as well just send them on a Caribbean cruise for a month, all inclusive, because that's what £4,500 a month will get you for your money.
They were sold the idea the barge was cheaper on the taxpayer's pocket than Asylum hotels. But in an investigation by the National Audit Office into the Home Office's asylum policy, it was revealed not only is this more expensive than hotels, at the time of commissioning the barge, the Home Office had not even estimated costs. They were flying blind.
I'm shocked, really. I mean, the Home Office blatantly lied. They told us that the Bibby Stockholm was to offer value for the taxpayer for housing asylum seekers. And we now know from the National Audit Office document that was released at the end of March that it's not just a little bit more expensive, it's exorbitantly more expensive. It's obscene, the cost, the money that is being thrown at this barge.
In a statement, the Home Office told GB News, "We have always been clear that the use of asylum hotels is unacceptable, and that's why we acted swiftly to reduce the impact on local communities by moving asylum seekers onto barges and former military sites. While the National Audit Office's figures include set-up costs, it is currently better value for money for the taxpayer to continue with these sites than to use hotels." But the taxpayers in Portland don't feel they're getting value. And they don't feel valued either. And it's starting to be a problem. Jeff Moody, GB News.
All right, still to come, the disgraced American football star and Hollywood star O.J. Simpson, well, he's died aged 76, and we'll be looking back at when he was the centre of the trial of the century. Do you remember that? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stay with us.
Hello again. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. It's going to be a bit of a wet picture across northern parts today, but drier, brighter and warmer further south because we have high pressure dominating here. Further north though, we have low pressure pushing its way in, and frontal systems bring the focus for some outbreaks of rain that are sweeping in across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England and into Scotland, though the far northeast of Scotland clinging on to some sunshine into the afternoon. Do watch out for some strong gusty winds, particularly in the northwest. Across central southern parts of England and Wales, a lot of bright, fine weather to be had. Although the sunshine may be quite hazy, it's pretty strong now, and so we're likely to see temperatures rising to highs of around 21, possibly 22 Celsius. Sticking with the north-south split as we go through the night, so further outbreaks of rain across northern parts could be quite heavy at times. Drier towards the south, could be some murkiness developing around south coastal parts around the English Channel, but also some clear skies developing at times. Despite the clear skies, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, most places holding up in double figures or high single digits. As we go through Saturday then, a relatively mild start for many of us. Any mist and murk towards the south coast should clear away through the morning. There will be some outbreaks of rain across northern and western parts of England and Wales, but staying dry towards the southeast until the evening. Further north though, an unsettled picture across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some further outbreaks of heavy rain, which could be gusty at times too. Temperatures not quite as high as today. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson. Great to have you with us this morning. Disgraced American football star O.J. Simpson, well, he's dead at the age of 76 following a battle with cancer.
So, back in 1995, Simpson was acquitted for double murder of his ex-wife and her friend in a sensational case that divided America.
2 years later, a civil jury found O.J. Simpson liable for wrongful death in the double murder.
Let's bring in Chairman of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson, for more on this. Greg, what does O.J. Simpson's death mean for America, for his victims, the families?
Yeah, I think in many ways people look back at this sensational trial, as you pointed out, and will argue that, you know, many of the people who had supported him back then have changed their mind, and they realize that, you know, this probably wasn't a perfectly legitimate verdict. And you saw that with the civil case afterwards. So, you know, I don't think it's going to change, you know, the fact that he died yesterday won't change much. But I think that the sentiment about the trial has changed over the last 30 years.
And what do you remember about that time of, it's been dubbed the trial of the century,
Yeah.
but it really did polarise America.
Yeah, I think it definitely did. And if anything, it exposed the polarization that had existed. And, you know, African Americans at that time did not trust the judicial system. I think after the verdict, after the trial, I think most Americans lost trust in the judicial system because, you know, you either thought the verdict was right or you didn't. That really fell along racial lines. So African Americans were much more likely to think that he was innocent, and everybody else thought he was guilty. And so that also has changed. I think African Americans have viewed that the trial, in retrospect, as somewhat of a travesty.
Lawyers for Nicole Brown, and that's O.J. Simpson's ex-wife, her friend Ronald Goldman, they are coming out now. They are saying he was a murderer. He was found liable in a civil lawsuit. Yeah. And it does look like there's going to be a big dispute over his estate because he owes them millions and they've seen hardly any of it.
Right. He was supposed to pay $35 million and made very little attempt at actually paying that. So, you know, that I think will be an issue. And
did he have that kind of money? How big is his estate?
He probably does not have $35 million, is my guess. At the time, you know, he was, I would call it a B actor. You know, he was wealthy by most standards, but not in terms of the way athletes are paid today. So I think he was a little early for putting away a pile of money, and he never really became a movie star. He was sort of a second-rate movie star. So I don't think he was rolling in money, but I do think that, you know, the Goldmans never really got a fair trial, and so I hope there is something left over in his estate where they can recover some of that verdict.
And just as a reminder, he was linked to the scene with DNA evidence, wasn't he? Yeah. But yet there came this time during the trial where he was made to try on this pair of gloves, which were found at the scene, I think. Yeah. But he said, look, the gloves don't fit. And it turned out, subsequently, that they didn't fit because he was taking arthritic medication, which swelled his hands.
Yes, and the fact that the gloves naturally shrink if they're left outside in the rain or whatever. So, you know, there's all kinds of arguments. You know, they claim that the DNA evidence was planted by the detective who had it out for OJ or something. I mean, there was so much that went wrong in that trial. I don't think the prosecutors were necessarily the best lawyers that were available. And so in many ways, LA wanted the verdict that they got. They didn't want to see violence. And remember, this is in the context of the Rodney King riots, which had occurred only 2 years before the O.J. Simpson murder trial.
Greg, we can't let you go without asking you about the latest state of the US presidential race.
Sure.
Biden, Trump, two older men.
Yes, 75% of Americans didn't want to see this. So it's in many ways a car crash of an election. Two very unpopular presidents. The reason I think Trump will win is because Biden is polling so poorly. Trump is -10 in terms of approval, disapproval. Biden's -21. No president, no incumbent president has ever won with those kind of numbers. So I think it's more of a people are judging.
Okay, I'll have to cut you off there. It's going to be a great election, not only that side of the pond, but here as well. And stay with GB News for that, Britain's election channel this year. That's all from us today. Up next is Tom and Emily on Good Afternoon Britain.
Have a great weekend.
Well, Keir Starmer's had his Friday rudely interrupted. The announcement of a police investigation into Angela Rayner. We'll have all of the details on that investigation and indeed its political implications.
Yes, because of course Keir Starmer wants us all to be talking about his full-throated defence of the nuclear deterrent. And also, one shopping centre in Kent is handing out stab vests to cleaners. Why on earth do cleaners need stab vests in modern Britain?
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It's going to be a bit of a wet picture across northern parts today, but drier, brighter and warmer further south because we have high pressure dominating here. Further north though, we have low pressure pushing its way in and frontal systems bring the focus for some outbreaks of rain that are sweeping in across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England and into Scotland, though the far northeast of Scotland clinging on to some sunshine into the afternoon. Do watch out for some strong gusty winds, particularly in the northwest. Across central southern parts of England and Wales, a lot of bright, fine weather to be had. Although the sunshine may be quite hazy, it's pretty strong now, and so we're likely to see temperatures rising to highs of around 21, possibly 22 Celsius. Sticking with the north-south split as we go through the night, so further outbreaks of rain across northern parts could be quite heavy at times. Drier towards the south, could be some murkiness developing around south coastal parts around the English Channel, but also some clear skies developing at times. Despite the clear skies, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, most places holding up in double figures or high single digits. As we go through Saturday then, a relatively mild start for many of us. Any mist and murk towards the south coast should clear away through the morning. There will be some outbreaks of rain across northern and western parts of England and Wales, but staying dry towards the southeast until the evening. Further north though, an unsettled picture across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some further outbreaks of heavy rain, which could be gusty at times too. Temperatures not quite as high as today. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to win our biggest prize of the year so far. First, there's a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash for you to spend this summer. Then, we want to send you on a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. Thanks to Variety Cruises, you'll be able to choose from any of their 2025 Greek adventures and discover Greece like never before. And with flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, all you have to do is relax. We'll also give you these terrific travel treats. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in,